you're here, we'll begin. So, let's throw it open and see anything you want to talk about or engage with today.
So I had an opportunity to create a galaxy a couple months ago, and I'm wondering, what do we do with it now?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I don't know. I did that quite a few years ago. Was taken out to the edge of the universe, saw a beginnings of something, and engaged with it to shape it, and then birth something out of my own spirit. I didn't feel any sense of I needed to do anything with it. It was almost like, well, God's showing me this is the stuff you will be able to do, but I didn't really feel any sense of, because it was like the physical form of something, not necessarily something within it. I don't think I created any people or anything in it. So in that sense, it can just continue to grow and expand until we get to populate it. I do believe that, all of it was made for us. And I mean, it is an awesome thing when you think how vast the galaxy is and how amazing the universe is when, was it 200 billion galaxies potentially? Then that's probably an underestimate. And then each one potentially having an average of 400 million stars and 36 trillion stars or something. And that doesn't include all the planets and all the moons. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And he made it for us. And we're co-heirs of it. And I do believe we're responsible for seeing it restored and to expand and increase, because there's no end to the increase of it. But I personally didn't feel any sense of responsibility to do anything with it now. Now, I think that might change as we are entrusted with some authority that is commensurate with our sonship. And maybe as we mature in sonship, we will get some responsibility towards some of those things to look after them. I mean, I don't know. When you think of we're made as sons of God, is God going to give his sons a galaxy or few to look after and to be creative with? Are we going to create our own populations of something or not? If we're made in the image of God, if we're made creative, if we're made to be co-heirs, if we mature, will we be given responsibility? Well, Jesus seemed to indicate that with the parable of the talents, the 5 talents and the 2 talents and the 1 talents and the 5 and the 2 made 5 more and 2 more, and they were given responsibility to rule over things. So maybe if we're faithful and not like the one who buried his talent and didn't do anything with it, and we learn to mature in sonship, perhaps in the future we will be given responsibility to administrate a galaxy or 2 or 3 or 4, because there's obviously a few of them, creatively. What that will mean, I think we will probably be more in a position to be knowing what it means when we're in the position of authority that he will release it to us. But has sort of very interesting connotations to what's possible, doesn't it? But there we go. So what do you think you're going to do with it?
I don't know, but as you were talking, there's those theories out there that says, Earth is just going to be destroyed and all the people would have to be relocated. And so it's interesting that, we're creating these galaxies, and how convenient is that?
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't feel the Earth is going to be destroyed. I think it will be restored back to its original place within the framework of heaven and the heavens, and back into alignment and back into what it was. And therefore the whole of creation is waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. Are we going to populate it by expending beyond the Earth into the stars and occupying that by creating and colonizing the universe? Did God create it to be colonized? Did he create it for us to continue on this planet, but bringing it back into its rightful place and then see what happens from there? Probably a mixture of both. Will we be able to engage the stars and the planets that are habitable out there, or make them habitable? Sort of terragenesis type projects and terraforming projects and forming things with, you know, life in mind. Sounds great. I mean, Adam did something with the animals in terms of their naming and forming. So I think there's plenty of hints in there that we will be doing some things like that. Just, I don't think most people are at a level yet that God would entrust them to look after the population of a galaxy. if we were to create a population in a galaxy. So,
well, Jesus was with me, and I remember him asking me all these questions. Well, what do you want it to have? Mountains? Do you want it to have oceans? Do you want it to have this? Do you want it to have, what kind of atmosphere do you want it to have? And it's just like, well, you know, people will need to live here. So, you know, we want people to, I want to make it like Earth, because so that people can live. And there's so many different personalities. Some people like mountains, some people like beach, you know. So, you know, it was just like all of these questions and the creativity behind it. So yeah, it was very interesting. And so these places would be very capable of holding human beings.
yeah, or non-human beings.
True, true.
You know, I mean, you only have to look at you know, the cantina scenes in some of the Star Wars films to see there's a whole lot of creativity out there in what different beings could look like. And actually, when you look at the angels and all the different angelic realms and all they look like, and the living creatures and the fiery sword and the fiery chariots and the fiery horses and all those sorts of things, they're all pretty special and all pretty different. So I think we will potentially get to be involved in some of that, but I think there's a little bit of maturing that needs to be done in the meantime.
You think?
But yeah, yeah, well, just a bit, just a little bit. But it's exciting, and I think, you know, let's have no limitations on our beliefs about the potential that we can be in sonship, and what the co-heirship of sonship means. If creation is going to be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God, then there is something that is going to be rising and shining, which is quite different from what it is now. And hopefully that will take us into whatever that will be. And, you know, it talks about ages to come, you know, and when you think of, like, you know, he's like talking to you, or what do you want this planet to be like? And, you know, within a galaxy, there may be billions and billions of planets. It does give some leeway to all sorts of creative expression, you know, but within it all feeling part of the overall whole that we're all connected to. So we're connected to creation. We were always connected to creation. We had a role in being light within creation. That will be restored. Creation will be restored, and our sonship will be recognized by creation, and therefore it will respond to us in ways that it isn't necessarily responding to us yet. And that will be really interesting to see. But yeah, fun stuff.
You know, years ago, we were talking about the parable about the cities, you know, some rule over 10 cities. And he said, think about it. That's a lot of cities, right? And I'm like, yeah. He said, where are they? And I'm like, I don't know. This is a long time ago.
Mm.
And then he just said, well, the earth is a seed. And that's when I closed my Bible, set it down. I said, okay, let's talk about this later, God. And I sat up and, one of those things back then that just really frightened me. Since then, he's had me handle strings of light in what looks like spiritual hands or whatever, but I mean, not just speaking light and releasing light, but actually handling light, strings. And I'm like, whoa, and then he's like, look around. Who do you think created this place? I'm like, because there's a lot of things that we do that our understanding and our human cognitive abilities don't remember or realize until you get a glimpse of it, until he starts to open it up and he said, well, we did, we created this. And I'm like, whoa, okay, when? It's mind boggling. And as our awareness expands and opens up and our recall increases, we're going to be very surprised.
Yeah, I believe that's really true. The more I've connected with God, the very essence of God, outside of my own limitations of my mind and outside the limitations of time, space, this continuum, into the now of God, the more that has begun to reconnect me to the memory of what I was connected to before and what involvement I had in that, and therefore what responsibility I still have in that. And I'm passionately drawn towards restoration and what it means to see everything restored and all the dimensions restored and all the interactions. And because some of the dimensions that exist and God created, which, a dimension, well, I guess you could say there are heavenly dimensions and there are earthly ones, and there's the physical dimension and the spiritual one, but there are dimensions within those dimensions folded that, according to string theorists, which is like a theory of how does everything form and what are the basic building blocks of all matter, which is energy, and strings of energy vibrating, and those little donuts of strings are actually God's voice vibrating and carrying the potential for continued expansion and continual formation of particles and waves and more particles and all that sort of thing. As you begin to grasp some of that, and you realize that, within the theory of string theory, mathematically, there needs to be, 11, 10, 12 different dimensions. Now, I'm being drawn recently to dimensional engagement, which is not cosmological engagement, if you like. It's beyond that. And I don't know what exists out there. I know I've experienced some of it. I know Ian Clayton talks about 270 different dimensional beings. Where are they? In some of those folded dimensions. And I have a heart towards them because it's part of creation, and I want to see everything restored wherever they are and whatever they've done and whatever state they're in. The same power of salvation to restore, reconcile, and bring everything back into God's original intention, purpose, is a desire that burns in my heart. And the more God has connected me to that, and I can remember probably over the last 7 years having encounters that reconnected me to it. I remember being in the Father's garden, just floating in the atmosphere in the Father's garden, being totally at rest and peace. And I got to that place where I felt I'm just part of this. And it felt like every atom, particle of my whole being exploded outwards and connected up with creation, with the quantum realm. I don't know what I was connecting with, but I felt the groan. I felt this isn't how it's supposed to be. I felt that I was in harmony with a discord. So in a sense, I was connected to something that was groaning, that wasn't harmonious, that was discordant, that was out of alignment, out of sync. But I felt this isn't right, and felt drawn towards it. And I've had several experiences where I've connected up with the music or the sound or the frequency of the created order, and felt again, just the notes out of place and the harmony is not there, and felt, oh, just so long for this to be back into harmoniousness, if that's a word. Harmony, I guess the word is, I suppose. But each of those encounters has just unveiled a deeper desire in me to connect with that creation, to see it restored, to see it made whole, to see it come back into its original intent and purpose. Just feeling that sense, just because I feel more connected to it. And the more my memory of my spirit, of who I was, is remapped onto the consciousness that I now have, then I'm beginning to align myself with those memories, and those memories are motivating me and stirring me and impassioning me. And therefore, a few years ago, I would have thought, oh yeah, restoration, great. Now it's just like, oh, restoration, that's it. That's why we're here, to see the restoration of all things, back to not just God's what happened or what was, but what would have been had we continued to expand and to grow and mature. So I don't want to go back to Adam's immaturity. I want to go back to what I want to be, what Adam would have been had he continued to mature in this time sort of space, if you like, or in the creation that God made us to be involved with. So I think creation is groaning. There is a sound. It should connect with us. If it's a lower frequency than it should, then that lower frequency should respond to our higher frequency. And the more we're in tune with the frequency of love, and we are radiating love, emanating love, broadcasting love, creation should respond to us and begin to have its frequency raised, so it can come back into that beautiful, harmonious place with no absence of light, with nothing missing, nothing broken, everything just awesomely together in one unison. I want to see that, I desperately want to see it. And therefore I want to mature to a place where I can be radiating love and broadcasting love and being love. If God is love and we're made in his image, then we should be love. We should be an expression of love, love's expression, love's light, to touch wherever there's darkness, wherever there's an absence of light, to bring light into that darkness, and to see creation itself. The image that's behind me in terms of those sort of nebulas and those things out there, they're beautiful colors, but they're contained within darkness. Originally, there was no darkness. I want to see it back to where there is no darkness. Everything is just an expression of glorious light. And for us, I think, arise, shine, your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. Now it's our time to arise and shine, and to begin to radiate life, love, all those amazing things, as we are restored ourselves, so we can bring restoration into our freedom. I think, it's an amazing verse in Romans 8. Creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So what's our freedom? What does our freedom look like? Because we should be passionately pursuing that freedom as sons, to come into the fullness of our sonship, so that creation itself can be brought into that freedom of the very essence of who we are, in the very essence of who God is, which is love. God is love, God is light, God is spirit, and all of those things, I think, are expressions of the very character and nature of God himself. And he wants us to be a reflection of that and to be like him. I think Jesus obviously freaked a lot of people out and challenged a lot of people when he was around. One of them being his talking about the Father, and therefore them accusing him of making himself to be God, which is the implication. If God was the Father, then he was the Son. And as we come into our sonship with a relationship with the Father, you know, Jesus said, well, your word says that you are gods, you know, little g, but gods. Well, a son of God must be like a god, but not God, but a son of God. And therefore, what does that mean? I think there's so much to pursue in really recognizing our true identity and the full, unlimited nature of what that is, which creation is longing for us to express so it can be free from this disharmony that it's living in. So we must come into harmony. And, you know, we can't even be harmonious with a group of people usually. So there's some work to be done in bringing us into that harmony within body, soul, spirit, no fragmentation, fracturedness, brokenness, all those things dealt within us, so that then we can then have those type of relationships with each other and obviously with the creation itself. That responds when it sees and feels and senses the harmony of our freedom, our wholeness, our oneness. So lots of awesome things, I think, ahead for us.
Talking about harmony with groups of people, he even showed me that scenario like a building block. I mean, he presented molecules in front of me and atoms, you know, and he started showing these are my building blocks. And he said, and that's why family groups, they get together. It's easier to get along in a smaller group, and then that smaller group are connected by one or two to other groups. And he says, it's just the way I build things.
Yeah.
And I went, oh. I mean, he showed me even people and groups of people like molecules that come together to build an organization or an organism or a, you know, it's just interesting.
Yeah. And you know, I think you see the fractal formula in terms of everything is a fractal of everything, which is a fractal of everything. So how those micro things at a quantum level, all those particles, how they interact, how the electrons and the neutrons and the positrons and how it all works, you know, is just a pattern of how family works and how the universe works. And everything really is based on the same basic relational foundational pattern. And then it just needs to be outworked in that way. And so, yeah, what God done, it's done, is there for us to outwork and discover and outwork ourselves. So it is great when you see into something beyond what you can see with your natural eyes, and you begin to see how everything is created and held together, and it's all basically like a fern made up of fronds, made up of fronds, made up of little fronds and fronds and fronds and fronds. And it's God has just created thing with the golden mean and phi being a numerical value that is a representation of that perfect symmetry, Fibonacci number sequences. I love fractal images. When you have an image that's made up of images, which is made up of images, which is made up of images, I just think it's beautiful. And I think when you see a picture, you know, sometimes you see in galleries pictures which look really amazing. And then when you get closer to them, you realize that they're made up of actually pictures of another face. And there's like thousands of faces that make up this picture. But when you stand back, it's like, it looks like the picture of this pet face, but it's made up of lots of other faces. And I think that's God's desire when it comes to building us together into family, into ecclesias that are relating with one another. When you look at the whole, it should be just made up of lots of little things that look like the whole, but they're all representatives of the whole, uniquely different, but all making the overall beautiful picture that represents what God is desiring it to be in beautiful relationships and harmony, you know. Obviously.
And the most mind-blowing part of that is that infinity goes both ways. And we have some connection throughout all of it.
Hmm.
In a
Yeah.
fractal sense, you know, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't get your mind around it.
Well, I don't think it is a sense of trying to understand it. It's trying to connect to it spiritually and be connected to it and sense it and feel it and be part of the answer to it by bringing harmony in our own lives. It's like if one little bit of harmony can touch somebody and help them come into harmony, and then touch someone can make them into harmony, ultimately you'll have a symphony of amazing sounds as we're all together producing this beautiful connection of sound that's all made up of each of us as notes together. You know, one note is pretty boring, isn't it? You know, duh, 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 duh. But as soon as you get 5 notes, you can get all sorts, you know, of a pentatonic scale or 7 notes. You can get a whole host of infinite varieties of how those notes can be put together. You know, a chord is so much more interesting than a note. And a chord is made up of a root note, made up of other notes around that root note, which effectively work together harmoniously. So when you play a chord, it's like this full sound. Where you play a note, it's just one note. And I think we're all supposed to be notes that are in chords with others, and therefore never supposed to be just on our own. That's right. Accord, in accord, in agreement, in unity, in relationship. I think that's just the beauty. And music is so much intrinsically part of the nature of God, and sound and frequency and harmony in it all. I just think of, you know, I know God's spoken to me about the music of the spheres. You know, how all these amazing spheres and dimensional connections in God it's a beautiful symphony. It produces amazing creativeness in sound, which is awesome. You know, and you hear it. You know, sometimes I just hear it. You know, I just hear something coming out of creation, where there is some little bit of harmony, which actually just catches my attention and draws me towards that. When I can just feel, wow, that's amazing. You know, so yeah. So
I've heard that harmony. I mean, it was like it was a worship of God. It was like creation was worshiping. I was being pulled along by Holy Spirit through the cosmos, and I could hear individual praise and worship of God, but it was all the same sound, if that made sense. I mean, I could hear each individual different praise, yet it was all one big, huge praise. It was, I mean, it was like, I gotta get this CD. You know, it was like, I gotta get this. It was amazing. It was, but it was, I mean, it was just the fact that it was multitude of individual sounds, yet they made one big same sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Once you hear it, and once you have a glimpse of it in that sense, you're changed, aren't you, by it? It's just, you want that. It's just like, I want more of that. I want to see everything like that. No. And it happens sometimes. You get a congregation that are together and they're worshiping, and all of a sudden something switches, and you know they're operating on a different plane, and you know the angels are involved, and you know, where did that sound come from? And you know, almost like creation is singing. We're connecting in some way that is just different. It just makes this amazing unison of something, which is beyond description. It's so difficult to describe it, but it's just amazing to sense and to feel and to engage in. And it's life-changing, and it's so motivating to say, I want to see restoration. I want to see everything restored. I want nothing to be out of sync. everything to be in a place of peace, you know, wholeness. And I love the fact that, you know, it says in 2 Corinthians 5:19 there that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not counting their sin against them. And we have been given the ministry of reconciliation, and we have the word of reconciliation, and we're ambassadors of reconciliation to make sure everybody knows that he has reconciled everyone and is holding nothing against anybody. And there's no reason they can't come back into a beautiful, intimate relationship with him. No reason at all. He's done everything to make it possible that all of us can be restored into that whole relationship within him and be restored in ourselves to that harmony within us, soul, spirit, body, completely in harmonious relational connection and unity within ourselves. So it's so just God's heart, you know, God's heart is for that reconciliation to be known. He's reconciled everything to himself, and he wants us to say, I'm in. I want to be outworking that reconciliation. I want to experience that reconciliation. And so many people don't know what God has already done, sadly. And it's our responsibility to try and produce a sound that draws and attracts them to the harmony. You know, how is the world going to know? By our unity. John 17 is such a powerful chapter when it comes to relationship. How the world going to know? By our love for one another. You know, love each other like I've loved you. You know, I was talking to God, a while ago, and he was talking to me about the golden rule. You know, we have this golden rule: we'll treat others the way you want them to treat you. You know, so it's that sow and reap. You know, and then he said, I want to, you know, you've heard it said, but now I say unto you. And he said to me, treat others the way you want me to treat you. So I'm like,
amen.
Woo, that changes everything a little bit.
Amen.
So I'm still pondering on that. But it was one of those, you think this is what it is, but I want to take you into a whole different level of what this is. You know, it was pretty awesome. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to share or talk about?
On that note, I believe that one thing I've been thinking about all week long is how we've put up so many barriers between one another. And but not only that, but because a lot of that is things that we still need to clear out of our gates or whatsoever. But how even in the church we've allowed this political correctness to so consume our relationships that we can't be honest with one another. We'll beat around the bush, we'll talk to someone else, but when it comes to truth, we tend to sly away from it. Why? Because we don't want to offend, but then the truth offends. You know, and it's just like, I think there's a level of honesty that is required, especially among believers, that we speak the truth in love, but it's still spoken. And it's just, there's just so much behind the scenes stuff going on that we can't communicate with one another on that truth level. And that's one thing that I want to see changed, and the level of relationship and the level of love increase, the level of trust. we have been so hurt and damaged by, from the time we were children, from church leadership, from people that we trusted, that it's very hard for us to come together and have a true and honest conversation. I just, I just see that as a, it's just, it needs to be improved. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think some of that comes down to understanding the nature of love. And love is not wishy-washy, nice. Love has the other's welfare above itself. And therefore, if I see something that I am not prepared to share, then I'm not loving. And Jesus saw things that he shared, and love wouldn't say boo to a goose and was frightened to speak the truth. Jesus spoke the truth. So when he was speaking to the Pharisees and challenging them for their leading people astray and all the things, he didn't have an issue of speaking really directly to them, in ways in which they were obviously offended by, but that was still the truth spoken in love, because he wanted them to come out of their religious bondage and come into a relationship. So he called them a brood of vipers or a whitewashed tomb, which would have been highly offensive. And they, of course, got offended. And we do need to be honest with people and also open to their honesty. So there's two different sides to it. I need to be open, and I need to say to people, I'm open for you to speak the truth to me, but I also need to be willing to be honest to speak the truth to them. And sometimes people are so fearful of being rejected that they will not speak the truth, even though they see it, and therefore they're not willing to help that person and be willing to risk the rejection to be able to help. I mean, Jesus was rejected by them. Didn't stop him coming, and it didn't stop him demonstrating the love of God. But the love of God is not weak. The love of God is strong. And the love of God will speak the truth, even if it means being rejected. The love will speak. And God spoke. And he wants us to be both open to others and honest with others. He wants us to live in a state of transparency, so that I am not hiding from people the things that I know. And so many people have a hidden self. They know things, but they're not willing to be open about them or be real about them. So they live pretense, in a pretense that isn't reality, but it's a reality that they project. And so many people go around living in that state of pretense, afraid to be real, afraid to be honest, afraid to be themselves, for fear of man, of what will someone think, what will someone say. And we need to be free from all that. And we need to be free. What does it matter what anyone says, so long as God says, I love you? And he does. So if God loves me, does it matter that someone else doesn't love me? It shouldn't, but often it does. And I believe God obviously wants that to bring us all to a place where we're secure in his love. Therefore, we can be secure with other people. But most people don't trust God, let alone trusting others, if they're honest. And we've got to get to that point where we truly are entered into a full, loving, trusting relationship with God as our Father. So then, from that basis of secure foundation of knowing who we are, knowing our identity in that relationship, then we are able then to reach and engage others with the same love that we've received. But it's a challenge, and the church system does not promote a open, honest, transparent environment because of fear and because of control, and in all the different things. We need to see a wholeness come so that people can be real and people can be honest, and people don't have to hide and put on their Sunday face, or they put on their Sunday best and hide behind the mask and masquerade. You know, so many masks are worn because people are afraid to let people see the real them for fear of being rejected. And so many people want affirmation from others so much that they will compromise and do all sorts of things just so they won't be seen wrongly in someone's eyes. And the only way that's going to change is if we truly come into a deeper relationship with God of intimacy, that we know who we are in relationship to him, and we don't get our frame of reference from anybody else. You know, there is so much need out there that people are trying to get met. So that's why there's codependency relationships. You know, I'm willing to put up with this because it feeds me. And that whole feed me, feed me, feed me is out there. I need to be fed with affirmation. I need to be loved. I need to be patted on the back. And all that's there because we don't know God's love and affirmation and acceptance in the way he wants us to. So we're seeking it in other places. And at its worst, we seek it in materialism and in things which can never replace the love of God in our lives, but we still pursue them because they're offered to us. And I think the whole world's advertising system preys on that. You know, why do we advertise things the way we do? Mostly to promote image. You know, if you don't look like this, if you don't have this piece of material, if you don't have this job, or if you don't have this type of house, or if you don't have this type of car, you'll never feel whole. You'll never feel good enough. You know, and you get caught into the keeping up with the Joneses, excuse the pun, in that scenario of, well, I'll never be whole unless I've got that, like they've got. And so we end up competing with others, where God has blessed us with it all anyway. You know, he has blessed us with amazing love and relationship. We need to find it in him. You know, if we're trying to find it in someone else, anything in someone else, even husband and wife, if someone's demanding that their needs are met, they're never going to be met in any sort of relationship, even the most intimate one of husband and wife, because that is only designed to be met by God, you know, not through someone else. So there's a lot, that we need to look and see, but it starts with us. Am I willing to say to God, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and see if there's any anxious thoughts, if there's any wicked way in me. Lead me in the everlasting way. In other words, lead me back to who I was before I was here, so that I can get back to the security of knowing my true identity as a son of God. But are we willing to ask God to search us? And are we willing then to allow others to be the searchlight that God uses? That's where I think real security comes, in knowing who you are without needing that to be from what you do or anyone else's opinion or affirmation. It comes from God. And I love the fact how the Father affirmed Jesus, opening heaven. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. You know, in whom my soul delights is another way of expressing that. You know, wouldn't it be wonderful, you know, to hear God say, my soul delights in you? Well, he does. Just most of us are not listening to that source, and not listening for the vast sum of his thoughts about us, that he wants to reveal to us, so that we can truly be secure in that wonderful relationship, affirmed, accepted, loved, and know our significance comes from that relationship of being a child of God, not from what we do. And all the performance orientated things that people get caught up in, of trying to impress and trying to do something so they'll be noticed, to find significance, all those things will fall away and we'll realize we don't need it. Go ahead, Pam.
So I believe you heard David Van Koovering pass on to glory yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, being that forerunner in quantum physics, connecting quantum physics and science to God, man, am I expecting an outpour. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
know, the seed, you know, once the seed falls to the ground type of thing, there is going to be such amazing revelation on the God of quantum physics, you know, God in quantum physics, if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I mean, not celebrate, you know what I'm saying, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's an amazing man. Loved him.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I've got his stuff and got his Elsewhere book and all those sorts of things. And yeah, he was such a lovely character. Um, I've got some pieces of rock from various places with sounds that he had given to me. One was in the Elsewhere book, and another one was given to me from some place in significant. So yeah, that is amazing. So when someone is an individual, becomes, as you say, a seed which can multiply, then the revelation from the cloud of witnesses, men in white linen perspective, can multiply and increase. So yes, you would certainly expect there to be a increase in what that whole area of revelation will unfold. Now he's free from the constraints of time and space in that
Oh
way.
yeah. Oh yeah. He's around. He's enjoying those around me for sure. I'm like, oh my gosh. And you know, his quirky personality. I mean, it's just, I just laugh. You know, I'm just full of joy. Not that he left, you know, his presence will be missed in the earth realm, but the value he leaves behind is just, it's just multiplied.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. And I think it was great a few years ago. I think it was a couple of years ago to see him and Ian Clayton and Justin Abraham in the same conference. That was great
Oh
because
yeah.
it was sort of almost like three generations were there, and there was something about about three generations. I think God is really wanting us to come into, sort of sort of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we just haven't had that three generational working together. It's like so many people, well, we're going to pass the baton to the next generation or not. And so we resist passing the baton to the next generation. We're going to keep it for ourselves. And you have so many dynamics going on there. And I believe God wants, let's say, this generation, this Joshua generation, to not pass the baton to the next harvest generation, but to walk with them and to walk together so that then together we can reach out to receive the harvest generation. And together we'll have three generations working together, which is the government of God in its fullness, if you like, on earth as it is in heaven. And I'm looking for that. That's my desire, is to be part of a generation that will walk with the next, mentoring them, blessing them, releasing them, empowering them so they can do the same with the next generation, rather than how it's been. You had Moses, who could have done that with Joshua, but didn't. Died in the wilderness without walking with him. And then, unfortunately, you have Joshua and the next generation, but then not the next one. So we've got I think there's a real dynamic in that. And it was great to see that on that day. I thought this was a prophetic statement of what God desires. Three generations, all in relationship with one another, all different, but all honoring each other and being together, which I think is God's desire. And he's looking for those who will embrace it and see it out work. Okie dokie. All right. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm.
It might have been 2 years ago. Well, it was over a year ago. We talked about Metatron's cube and adventuring in it. Have you been doing a lot more there?
Yeah, I have a yeah, I do have a mandate to engage it and to make it simplified and what it really is rather than what it really isn't. And I'm sort of working with that. Um, I think Metatron's cube and the tree of life and the seed of life and all those sacred geometric patterns and shapes, it's actually really fundamentally about where we are positioned within creation as sons. I think that's ultimately what it's really about. Yes, it's the interaction between dimensions, and yes, it's representative of lots of things, but really what it represents is us being in those places that connect everything and are light bearers into it all and are connectors in it all. And I think it's a reflection of that more than anything else. Yes, there's multiple layers of revelation towards it, but at its fundamental level, I think we look at it and where are we in it? You know, where is my point of connection? Am I connecting that dimension to dimension? Am I connecting that sphere of government together? Because it's about relational connections. And I think when you look at the pictures, they're all connecting. You know, there's nothing that's loose and hanging loose. It's all interconnected and connecting together. You know, it's not a free form tangle of lines. It's all connected, interconnecting, different shapes, all being seen in different ways. And I think it's a reflection of who we are in how God's created us to be and how he's created the universe to be, a reflection of the relationship that we have with him, which again goes back to what we were before.
Do you think it too can be a building block? God's
Yeah,
building?
because it's a fractal, you know, it's a fractal image. So yes, when you look at it, everything is built on relational connections. If there is nothing holding anything together, then it will all fall apart. And the vibrational frequency of the universe is the grace of God as those energy strings within the fabric of everything that holds it all together. And it's relational connections that hold it together. And those are a picture of the relational connections in the things you can't see, and then the relational connections in the things you can see, and the overall relational connections, which are all of us connecting with everything, whether we can see it, can't see it, we're all interconnected because we exist and live and move and have our being in him, in a sense, who is relational in terms of Father, Son, and Spirit in that wonderful circle of the dance of their intimacy with one another. So I think, yeah, it's a picture of intimacy. It's a picture of relationship. It's a picture of how everything's held together, how the dimensions exist together. I mean, it's just, you know, but I if you boil it down, it comes to relationship. That's, you know, rather than, you know, try and make it a functional thing, it's a relational thing. Everything's relating with one another within it, and everyone has its part and place within it. And I do believe that we are, within it. We're within the tree of life. The tree of life, in one sense, is Jesus, but we're all in him. We're all co-heirs with him. We're all in that as well. So when we begin to be in our places within it, then everything then begins to take on a different dimension to it, I think. Yeah. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more. And I'm sort of just meditating on things, and sometimes God will drop a little thing in my heart, and I'm just sort of, oh yeah, I need to pursue that. So yeah, I'm still connecting. I'm still engaging in it.
Well, be encouraged. We still have at least 80% of our brain to be activated.
And when our spiritual consciousness remaps our physical consciousness to reconnect all those things that we can't see, then we will again, yes, have that increased capacity to see things from that perspective once again, which will be great.
Yeah, it's like when the part of our brain that functions in the spirit realm, when it begins to actually operate here, look out. Look out.
Definitely so. Okie dokie. Okay, I'll leave it.